Hi, this is Chad Baker, and I'm here with Andy Sulak and Kevin Kornblith. Andy and I are with LE Software. Kevin is with HPE Zerto. And today we're talking about the gaps in Microsoft 365 protection. So as you know, LE Software, we do PST migrations. So we migrate a whole lot of PST data to Office 365. But what happens once it gets there? So Andy, if you could kind of cover how Exchange protects the data natively.
Yeah, sure. So from an end user perspective, they have, you have your mailbox items. You can delete items and it'll go into the recycle bin or actually into the deleted items, which is effectively a recycle bin. By default, those are kept for 14 days. That can be extended to 30. And then once they're deleted out of there, there's up to an additional 30 days, but then it's gone. As far as the data itself, like per mailbox, every mailbox is kept in an Exchange database. And then those databases are protected by DAGs, or database availability groups, which are replicated across separate data centers in the same region within Azure in the M365 scope. So we have, multiple copies. So for failover at a mailbox or even at a server level, that's how Exchange protects those. So.
And which is very similar, which you'll probably hear quite often from us here, is that very similar to how Microsoft also protects Microsoft OneDrive. So they same thing. So data centers are geo-distributed and they're region fault tolerant, and the data is mirrored into at least two different Azure regions. And then you also get that magic 30 days of being able to restore data that possibly was deleted from OneDrive, but excluding the hard deleted data.
Yeah. And then kind of adding on to that with SharePoint, the back end for SharePoint OneDrive is pretty simple or similar with the Azure storage, where SharePoint adds on, Azure SQL to store the metadata and basically the structures. And then you do have a retention time of 93 days for SharePoint. You can delete an item, it then goes into the site recycle bin. It can be deleted from there, goes into the site collection recycle bin, but really across any those two, you still have up to 93 days. Then after that, it's gone. So, and then I think for Entra ID as the next part.
Very similar, very similar. It's very similar to the high availability, like most people might be more familiar with within Active Directory, because Entra really is Active Directory. Is you've got geo-replication, you've got a recycle bin of deleted objects. However, with Entra, getting to those deleted objects is quite a bit harder. That you have to use the Graph API, for instance, possibly to be able to restore objects. So Microsoft provides Graph API access to be able to get some deleted items. And then there's a big gap within Entra when it comes to application identities. So in order to be able to, if say, protect against misconfiguration within an application identity, you have to use the Microsoft Entra exporter to export that information so that then that can be backed up. So that's kind of the big things we wanted to cover in Microsoft 365. And I think, as we were explaining, I think a lot of people saw some gaps there. So Kevin, this is where you come in to kind of talk about those gaps and ways to kind of mitigate those.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. There's a common misperception there that Microsoft is going to be, they're going to save all your data and you're going to have it there no matter what happens. To what you guys just walked through, there is a lot of high availability, built into the platform. However, if you were to lose data, you heard 14 days, 30 days, 93 days. There's time frames where all of a sudden that's not going to be in that ecosystem. And if you look at what the user is responsible for, under the shared model, the shared responsibility model, they're responsible for the data plane, which is important. That's the actual data, but also the user plane and the administration plane. And the gaps that are there right now is that if there's an accidental deletion, if there's database corruption or some kind of data corruption, or if there's a ransomware attack, whatever it might be, or someone just hard deletes things either maliciously or accidentally, after it's outside of that the Microsoft ecosystem, it's gone, right? There's no coming back. So with that, you need to also the native options, as Chad, you kind of were walking through some of the native options that are there for data protection. Those native options all put it right back into the same fault domain, and as everybody knows from a data protection perspective, you want to get all of that data out of there, and you have to be able to go and restore it from any point in time outside of that fault domain, right? So it's extremely important. So those are the gaps. And then Entra ID, there's even more gaps around conditional access policies, enterprise applications, Intune configurations. All of these things are usually completely left unprotected, and it can be a very big disaster if that were ever to get corrupted or move along. So that's, at a high level, that's kind of the overall gaps that are out there. And Zerto Zerto Backup for SAAS, we are able to protect each and every one of those pieces of the puzzle holistically and provide the ability outside of the fault domain so that you can then restore it any for whatever the reason, whatever that disaster that might happen to your business, you're able to put it back online. And it's really important to have all three of those different data, the data plane, the user plane, and the administration plane ready to go put back online when you need it. If you only get the data plane and you don't have the user plane, you still have a hot mess, right?
Yep. And something just to kind of highlight what you were talking about, really what I think our big message here is that people think that, Microsoft kind of has everything covered for them on the protection side. And I think this little graphic of the, what for the Entra ID of what the customer's responsible versus what Microsoft's responsible for, you can see there that they're basically like, oh, well, we give you some APIs.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very limited in its scope and scale. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. That's all we have for today on the Microsoft 365 data protection gaps. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.